want to get an idea. How many of you here are writers or write? Okay, so that's a number of us. There's also a few of you that I recognize. So I just want to talk a little bit about my own journey into writing. It's something that I've been doing for the last few years. And it started in a pretty funny way actually. My mom buys me these really cheesy t-shirts, okay? And she bought me one that says, "I'm too busy, read my blog." And I thought that was pretty funny, except I didn't have a blog. But every time I wanted to throw it away, something made me, I was like, no, I want to keep it. Someday I'll probably have a blog. Until like 3 years ago, literally I was about to throw it and I was like, you need to start a blog, otherwise you can't keep that t-shirt anymore. And that's literally how I started my blog. And I thought that it would just be something that where I would journal my feelings or thoughts in. And eventually it kind of just blew up into this place where I was constantly writing expressions. And I didn't start with writing really long poems or fiction stories or anything. It's just a place where I would keep sharing my thoughts. And then I saw how people were responding to it. And then I saw how friends, strangers, or even friends who I'd fallen apart with, they started messaging me, talking about how it had resonated with them, whatever I'd written. So for me personally, writing has been a journey of healing, of course expressing, protesting, as a lot of you, some of you may know, I keep ranting about traffic all the time. But that's kind of my journey. But when I meet a lot of people here in Dhaka since I moved back, and a lot of people, they'll be like, yeah, I've been writing for a long time, and that's why I'm a writer, or that's why I want to be a writer. And I try to kind of trace back, because when I was really young, when I was in school, I used to write a lot. And I tried to trace back, and I realized that I can't really pinpoint a time when I didn't write, but it was never really acknowledged as something that you do. It was just always something that you did on the side. It was always outside of the margin. It was like, yeah, she's really good at math, she's really good at this. Yeah, sometimes she writes. Or it was kind of always like a funny anecdote that, you have a book of, oh, Samira, she writes these funny poems, or rhymes, or chora, as we were taught when we were kids. And that got me to thinking, why is it that we do that? Why is it that when a kid is good at math or good at science, we automatically assume that they're going to grow up to become a very good businessman or a scientist or architect? Whatever, so I'm just really throwing out professionals. But why is it that we never really say that this person could go on to become a poet? This person could go on to become a writer? It's always our writings from whatever we used to write when we were small, it's always kept as a souvenir of our childhood. There's always that kind of inherent understanding that journey is going to end once you grow up to be an adult. And that realization kind of was very problematic for me because, when you don't acknowledge the art in a child, especially at an early age, you kind of stifle the artist in them. As we say in Bangla, and that's why people like me who've been writing since I was a kid don't realize it until very late that this is something that I can do. This is something I can pursue. This is something I can dream of because this has been my most honest form of communicating with the rest of the world. And I think, but also on the same note, it's also important to acknowledge a lot of people say that there's a writer in everyone, which I don't believe that. Oh my god. Let me complete the sentence. And I used to think there's a writer in everyone until I heard a Random House publisher talking at the Hay Festival last year, and it was like, she went up on stage and said, there is not a writer in everyone. I go through the slush pile. There is not a writer in everyone, but there's an artist in everyone. That's something I genuinely believe to my heart. Is what creates art in us, what triggers art, is our experiences. and us as human beings, we are constantly experiencing things, emotions to experience by virtue of our existence. So while I don't believe there's a writer in everyone, I generally believe there's an artist in everyone, and it could be your most honest form of expression or interaction. Could be music, could be painting, could be sculpting, it could be very many things, or it could be writing, whatever. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. It's important to acknowledge from early on among our children that there are artists in them. Because as I said earlier, like when you don't do that, you shun that voice from a very early on. Like whenever I used to have like these really tiny poem books. I used to write in Bangla. I used to have these really tiny poetry books, but it was always something that was eventually going to be discarded. It was never going to be a big thing in my life, right? And when you do that, when you're constantly doing that to a child, I was never really actively discouraged from becoming a writer, but I was never actively encouraged either. The focus was more on math, or like she's going to become a businesswoman, which now that I look back, it's hilarious. I would say myself as that. But yeah, so when you do that, you kind of confine yourself into a comfort zone of our society's idea of what accomplishments are, our society's ideas of what success is, and that comfort zone, it can be dangerous. It can be problematic because when you're cushioned like that, you don't question a lot of things. You don't question why is there so much statelessness in our country, or why is that person being treated unfairly. It on a greater level, it shuns your questioning or like curiosity, and that can be like extremely problematic. And for me, my personal journey has been one of kind of trying to escape the confines of my own comfort zone, which has pretty much been my family. I grew up here with a very close-knit family, and they were always constantly like, they knew they knew my whole business, they knew everything I did, and I was always conditioned to be afraid than to be adventurous. As a lot of girls are, especially in our country. I don't blame our parents. They come from a completely different generation, completely different, thought of schools, and that's fine. But for me, that's been a journey of personal attainment, to like actually get out of that and do things my own way. Just a very small example is I travel a lot, as Max said. I enjoy doing that a lot. But something that I started doing recently, and which is my parents' biggest nightmare, is I started traveling alone. And it pushes me out of my comfort zone. It makes me terrified because I'm someone who, as I said, I've been conditioned more to fear than to adventure. And I'm used to like looking over my shoulder, constantly trying to see, who's out there. But again, like what it has forced me to do, it has forced me to engage in dialogue with myself, and that has contributed so much to my writing as well. Because when you're doing that, that's engaging on a very different level. And I'm a writer, so I don't like think out with words. I don't think out verbally. So that's something that's really contributed to my kind of work. But yeah. Oh, another thing about writing for artists or art is, over the years, as we see, it's art has been, as I said, art for me has been a journey of like healing, of processing a lot of things, of engaging and interacting with the world. But like also, historically it's been such a strong form of protests, right? On one hand, you have, not to go against my other profession, on one hand you have news reports or research reports that will give you numbers and facts and statistics. But we're human beings. Numbers and facts don't resonate with us as well as emotions do. And art is what brings that out, right? So just to give a very recent example, do you guys know about the conference of the climate change conference that happened, COP21? So there was like a bunch of things, like every minute there was a new article, there was some new update about it, right? But the one article and I'm not even someone who's interested in climate change at all. But the one thing that really kind of stood out to me was this group of activists who went around Paris and they put up posters, like their satire pieces of companies which were funding the conference, but who also contribute to a lot of global environmental problems. And it was, it was a poster of Volkswagen, of Air France, and a bunch of other Mobil, I think, a bunch of different companies doing that. And I hadn't heard that story anywhere else, and that kind of called out to me more than any of the other things did. But yeah, so I mean, to go back to my point, again, for a lot of us, like protests and revolutions, are made kind of visible through art more than through any other media. So I think it's dangerous when we kind of shun that artist's voice in our children from very early on. So what I'd like to say last before I perform one poem is, acknowledge the artist in you. Even if you're doodling while sitting in your office meetings, even that's something. Trust me, this is a long way to go from there. I've come here, and I'm still not even at the peak of my journey. I'm still very much in the process. But like I started literally with writing lines of expressions down. And now I write like pages of poems. Some of them are crap, some of them are fun, some of them are decent. So get out of your comfort zone, take that risk, and the universe will respond. It will have your back. I'm just going to perform a poem, and then we can have a Q&A if anyone's interested. And this poem is called "I Wanted to Paint the Atlantic Across Your Face." I wanted to paint the Atlantic across your face so that you would know I'm not lying when I say that the entire earth revolves around you and that your eyes have bits of New York buried in them. I wanted to take bits of your smile and drop it in all 5 oceans so that the whole world could taste the contagious joy of the boy who laughs like the rattles of a monsoon rain and weeps like a December snowfall. I wanted to remind the world that your back is the playground of my memories and the way it arches up against the sky on nights you've run out of pills and you're trying to fight it out. Baby, that is stronger than the patience with which a soldier waits his 7 letters home. I wanted to run my fingers across the Amazonian depth of your hair as the waves of your bones fell into my curves in the kind of harmony that shooting stars and thunderstorms are made of. I wanted to fit infinity within the length and depth and breadth of your body so that the world would know better than to measure their feelings against a number so powerless in the face of faith. I wanted to hold the world together with you. I wanted to hold the world together with you and let the snowflakes rest for a bit before mortals crush them into the madness of mud and water. I wanted to watch the oceans rise and the sunlight dim away, our hands clutched together in a promise. I wanted us to feel every inch of the rail tracks that crawl through Dhaka slums where mortals gather in the nighttime to taste everything from acid to gold, the price of their sweat unanswered for, the tips of their tongues and the hems of forgotten childhood songs. I wanted you to see, amid all these colors and chaos of presidential debates and environmental campaigns, this world forgets every day about its own martyrs. I wanted to remind you that the world doesn't fit into our palms as they once said it would, and that in reality the Atlantic is huge, and it is impossible for us to find everyone and tell them that it's okay. No matter how fast we drive, how viciously we fight our wars, we cannot beat the earth at making revolutions. So I just wanted to paint the Atlantic across your face. I wanted to fit the entire earth into your 5-foot existence, because only then could I proudly say to the sun, I have loved the entire earth and all its beings without breaking a single bone in my body. So try me.